down 2% the following year. It was back to even. And then last year, when digital 3D was introduced, it actually finally had a bump. But the arena complex, which added the IMAX, went up 10% the first year, went up 14% the next year, went up 25% the following year, and then last year with a strong 3D slate went up 35%. So it was a dramatic overperformance, and one that was building year on year. And that's one of the things that we see happening. Once people have this experience, they absolutely insist on coming back. And they tell their friends about it, and the word of mouth is huge. Exact same experience in the UK. On the left-hand side, you can see, well, actually on the right-hand side, you can see all of the major circuits in the UK marketplace. And overall, last year, the box office was up 13%, largely on the strength of the 3D releases. But the 3 multiplexes in the UK that had an IMAX auditorium for the entire year, on average, was up 30%. And they were all with Odeon, and not a surprise that Odeon has added more IMAX theaters since that time, and will probably continue to do more from there. As I mentioned on the onset, we've actually been in the educational game for an awful long time. And some of the educational films can deliver some huge box office. These are documentary movies, Deep Sea 3D, over $80 million in box office, and it's a 40-minute documentary about going underwater. We also have worked with NASA and created a whole library of space films. The most recent, we just recently launched a brand new movie called Hubble 3D, which has incredibly positive reviews and is doing a great box office. The movie one before that was Space Station 3, which was narrated by Tom Cruise and has delivered over $110 million in box office. T-Rex, Back to the Cretaceous, about dinosaurs in 3D, over $100 million in box office as well. The reality is, around the world, leading museums and science centers, zoos and aquariums use the IMAX medium to tell a bigger story than what they can actually deliver with their other exhibits. The very first permanent IMAX theater, we're also part of cultural attractions as well. And this building here actually hosts the very first permanent IMAX theater in Toronto at a cultural institution called Ontario Place. It opened over 40 years ago. The same projector is still there today. We're actually going to be adding the 3D component later this year. We've been a big part of multiplexes, and that's really the big growth segment for IMAX. But in the multiplex environment, what we find is what's most effective is showing educational programming in the morning and during the day, and then the Hollywood product at night. Like this Panasonic IMAX theater that's in Warsaw, Poland, has been incredibly popular with the educational component. About a year after they opened the theater, from the offices here, they used to have a pool every day. People working in the office would all chip in a little bit of money, and they would guess what would be the maximum number of school buses in the parking lot at one time during that day. And some days they would have up to 15 school buses all lined up one against the other with all the school kids coming in to see the IMAX 3D movies. The Kennedy Space Center, we actually have, as I mentioned, we've worked with NASA. We have a number of space movies. We actually designed special cameras that can fly up in space on the space shuttle. So that's how we created both Hubble 3D and Space Station 3D. This building here actually houses side-by-side IMAX theaters at the Kennedy Space Center. In Poitiers, France, you know, the architects have had a field day, and I mean, the gym that you're creating here is going to be a landmark in the Zagreb marketplace as well. This is actually part of a theme park about the future of film called Futuroscope in Poitiers, France. And this building here, both these buildings actually that you see here, each host an IMAX auditorium of a different configuration. And I think we have 7 technologies. Here's another IMAX theater at Futuroscope as well. This is the Shanghai Science and Technology Museum, probably the most spectacular science center in the world. It has 2 IMAX theaters, side by side, one delivering a 3D experience and another one in a dome. And because of the tremendous success of the Shanghai Science and Technology Museum, we now have IMAX theaters in museums and science centers all over China, including the China Film Museum in Beijing. And this is really where we kicked off with the educational component. This is the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. We've had an IMAX theater at the Smithsonian for about 40 years, and in fact, we now have 3 IMAX theaters at the Smithsonian, one at the Air and Space Museum, one at Natural History, and one out at, whatever, that one was called, I can't remember. Anyway, three with the Smithsonian. So that's what the IMAX experience is all about. I thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it over. Okay. There we go.